Into introducing our panelists. I'd like to start with our moderator, who has been so gracious to moderate a number of panels. Thank you very much, Usman. Usman Iqbal, MD, MPH, MBA, is Chief Medical Officer at Jules Pharma. His role is Chief Medical Officer at Jules, with over 15 years of experience across R&D, medical affairs, and value and access in biopharmaceuticals. Previous experience includes senior roles at AZ, AstraZeneca, Sanofi, focusing on neuroscience and oncology, former head of Sanofi Oncology, global evidence and value development. Expertise specializes in rare disease, digital health, AI, real-world evidence, health economics, and patient-centered research. Academic background holds MD from Usman Iqbal Medical College, MPH and MBA from Boston University. He's authored 50-plus publications and recognized in the marquee Who's Who in America 2023 with significant contributions to medical strategy and healthcare economics. Our next panelist is Oscar Carrasco-Zevallos, PhD. Oscar is the Director of Data Science and Digital Health at Johnson & Johnson Innovative Medicine. He leads AI strategic initiatives and product development at Johnson & Johnson and PathAI, enhancing AI integration in life sciences. Oscar specializes in AI product strategy, pharma tech partnerships, startup diligence, and regulatory strategies. Has academic background, PhD in biomedical engineering, with significant research at institutions like MIT and Duke. Authored 130-plus publications on AI applications in biopharma, R&D, and diagnostics, covering diverse diseases. And community engagement includes active mentoring of startups and participation in accelerators, incubators in the Cambridge, Boston area. Yingchun Spring Liu, PhD, Senior Principal Scientist, Precision Medicine, Computational Biology, Sanofi. Role leads a team focused on identifying drug targets and biomarkers for solid tumors, integrating multi-omic data and machine learning in advanced precision medicine. Former principal scientist specializing in patient stratification for immune diseases. Holds a master's degree in bioinformatics and PhD in computational biology from Lund University in Sweden. Completed postdoc training at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. Authored numerous high-impact research publications and precision medicine and computational biology, and enjoys outdoor activities and travel. Okay, I will give it over to our moderator, Usman. Thank you, Usman.
Thank you. I believe we can pull up the questions, or we don't need them. Okay. Thank you for the very nice keynote presentation. I believe we're going to firmly start with you, but we're going to have the way it was structured these panel discussions is we try to come up with as much as 50 questions as possible, because the goal is for folks who came to listen is to gather as much information, glean as much insights, and take it back next day to the projects and be able to influence those projects with both digital health and machine learning aspects. So that's what our goal is. We're going to start with a very standard question, but it requires a lot of detailing, I think, at our end, and I think this panel will be very instrumental in that. So in your presentation, there were very unique and nice examples of adoption of digital endpoints, and it was very impressive as well. Now let's come to the reality. We have hundreds of movement disorder trials right now going on, and pretty much, I mean, stride velocity and gait and all of that. These are very novel digital endpoints, but we don't see their representation in most of the movement disorder trials, in the primary or in the secondary setting. I think we'll be lucky if they kind of achieve an exploratory endpoint position. Similarly, if you talk about mainstream medicine, like cardiovascular trials, diabetes or arthritis, and we have input data, but that never gets into like beyond exploratory endpoint stratification. So the question that I think we were all wrestling with is like, it's a reality that there's a lot of work that needs to be done for digital endpoints, and there are so many stakeholders within the R&D organization that we have to convince to be able to get them to the other side of the fence. So what is the kind of key business case? Because at the end of the day, it's the ROI when that can actually influence the thought process. So this is for everyone in the panel. What is the key business case? In a nutshell, that can actually influence not just their thinking, but also their decision making.
Yeah, I think this is a $1 million question, and something that we struggle with, or like we discuss a lot, right? Because, well, I'll give you an example from the banking world, right? Like, I think all of us do online banking, all of us, but we don't really say online banking, we do banking on our phones, right? And what led to that is all the banks invested heavily in getting us the opportunity to do that banking on our phones. We need to do the same thing in clinical trials, right? We see value. We started to see value. For example, in the REBUILD trial, because they used the MVPA, the moderate vigorous physical activity, as a primary endpoint, together with the 6-minute walk test, they reduced the sample size by half. Okay, the drug didn't work, but they reached the decision faster. That's a big return of investment because you have less sites, you need less patients, you count the time it takes to get a drug to market, right? So there are really good examples of return on investment, but there needs to be investment. And at the moment, we talk to teams about the promise, like put this device so that we can collect data so that in the future, it can reduce your sample size. But you need to work with us now so that we can collect data to understand these endpoints. How do they relate with the traditional measures that you're collecting in the clinic? How do they relate with the patient perception, with the patient global impression of change, for example, right? So you need to build that analytical and clinical validation, and you need to invest to do that. But ultimately, do we believe this is the right thing to do? It is the right thing to do because technology has invaded every aspect of our lives. It needs to invade clinical trials. We need to do better at measuring patients' daily lives, how they're living with the disease, rather than just what they're doing in the clinic.
So Oscar, so we talk about sample size, and that's a very specific kind of criterion, and not many times, but the point is, not every time you're going to get that as your business case rational. Sometimes, you might not get that much reduction in sample size, and you might not get that buy-in. So beyond the sample size aspect, because it also depends on the study design, what other elements we want to glean, that there are other detailing of the endpoints and outcomes. You may not be able to reduce the sample size to begin with. So, this is a very good starting point, but we need more. And so from that perspective, what do you think that more entails?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's a lot of benefits to collecting this digital data from these clinical trials, and one of them is, even if the trial fails, for example, the drug doesn't work, so on and so forth, you can still reuse a lot of that data and develop new biomarkers, develop new digital endpoints, new methodologies that could be used across different TAs, across different programs. And ultimately, what you want to do as a pharma company is build out a strategy and a framework for developing these types of endpoints across all your programs. So as you start to collect these digital measures, use these digital technologies in these trials, it's good to have a centralized strategy and a centralized team to be able to take those learnings and share them across different TAs and different programs, so you're not reinventing the wheel, so to speak, every time you try to deploy this type of technology. I think that's really the key to building out a centralized strategy. And what I will say is really the trend is, it's been about a year or so since both EMA and FDA have started to qualify these endpoints as primary endpoints. So the trend is definitely towards adopting more and more of this technology in clinical trials. So starting to adopt them early in clinical trials is good, and we're using a lot of that data and that knowledge to deploy again across other programs and tiers. That's also important.
So Yingchun, I think taking it to the next level, we've been creating this kind of a business case. We take certain endpoints, we're reducing sample size, we're creating a centralized industry, but it would require a lot of modeling to be able to show at source that this is what we're going to get from an ROI standpoint. And I think AI has a very important role in that standpoint. What are your thoughts in terms of that?
Yeah, I think as a computational biologist, I think the challenge for the digital endpoint is first, what kind of digital data we're going to collect for the trial, because they have to be relevant to the clinical outcome. But that a lot of times this kind of information is unknown in the very beginning. That will really require us to collect more digital data for us to really learn this is a biomarker for the clinical outcome. And then another thing, I think yes, after we assume that we have a lot of digital data collected, and definitely it depends whether we are going to use the simple machine learning or maybe a deeper learning model. I think it really depends on the data amount. Like if you have a really large amount of digital data and the patients, we can consider use the deep learning. Otherwise, I think we will be overtrained with the data for, it will be very dangerous. We thought we are helping the clinical trial, but actually we're doing the opposite if you are overtrained with the data.
So since I've got a medical economics and health economic background as well, one of the things that I believe might be helping, please chime in on that, is to bring the payer perspective into the equation, because think about what's the most important issue that we're facing these days is Me Too drugs. And we really need to bring differentiation into the target product profile. So let's say we have 7 ABCs coming to the market in one indication. What a drug can do to differentiate itself if you have traditional endpoints, whether it's actually blended with digital endpoints as well. Wouldn't that enhance the differentiation profile of the drug right away? So that's where I'm thinking that I think what we're trying to do, what we're trying to kind of assess is what are the other entities beyond R&D that can help us champion our case. And I think commercial and market access, especially in early product development, can come and make a real impact in terms of like, hey, we need this differentiation, we need this digitization of the data to be able to expand the target product profile. Just quickly, you can chime in on that.
I couldn't agree more. And that actually, we think of 4 data streams. We think about what's the argument you need to make for patients, payers, regulators, and healthcare providers. So when you're thinking about developing these endpoints, you need to think about, is what I'm measuring meaningful to the patient, right? Because as Spring was saying, you can measure many different parameters for just one concept of interest, right? So I can have a sensor and can derive, I don't know, 25 different measures of gait. But which of them is going to be the endpoint of interest, right? And that relates to the endpoint I choose needs to relate to what's meaningful to patients. Is it they're going to walk more? Is it they're going to walk faster? Is it they're going to spend more time sitting and doing stuff as opposed to lying in bed, right? So that's on the patient side. But you also need to consider the payer perspective. What is going to give me as a commercial advantage in comparison to the endpoints that I already have, right? The HCPs. If I have this, will it translate to clinical care, which is the slide I had. I never reached to get to that. Right?
That's a whole different science.
And the regulators, right? Because, as I said, one of the biggest issues I think that we face is the different evidential requirements. Because we have digital endpoints that can capture treatment effect, can capture disease progression, but might not be meaningful to patients. So you cannot treat this as a co-op. They're actually more in the biomarker space, right? But then they need to be meaningful to patients. So it's kind of like the evidential requirements not very clear.
And that's where I think Martha is slightly fit for purpose, if you can solve that equation. But I think, just to summarize, we can have an approved drug, but at the end of the day, someone has to pay for it. And the more commercial and market access impact and input that you can bring into the digital strategy to be able to show an ROI, the better it would be. So we will move to the second question, which is actually more, I would say, challenging one. You showed that you need to, Pfizer is a big company and has a whole digital ecosystem. So it's kind of embedded in the cultural paradigm of the company, and obviously top-down leadership that, we have to go digital. And so, but the challenge, and this is coming from my personal experience, but also it's pretty evident, the clin dev professional, the clinical development leads, as you showed in your presentation, there's a huge learning curve. You have to learn a lot of areas, from scalability to inferential aspects to digital science to, as I said, business aspect and regulatory standardization. And there's a whole different fields of elemental and foundational learning. And most of the clinical development organization is really not trained in that. So how do you actually bridge the gap? Because the more they know about this field, the better it would be to convince and establish an ROI or create awareness on that. And so in a company like Pfizer, that's easy because you already have a digital ecosystem built in place, or many companies have that. So what are the key, like many of the folks right now over here are thinking, how can I convince my R&D counterpart in terms of, let's just explore a digital strategy. So what are the learning aspects that can actually help create awareness within the R&D about this field? All to everyone.
Yeah, so I think maybe it's all about bringing people along, right? It's all about understanding what is the value add, and the earlier you can integrate in the program, the better it is. If you integrate, we find that if you can integrate within the clinical team, like in phase 1, that's a much easier process to deal with than if you integrate, say, with the clinical team in phase 3. Because in phase 1, there is much more, one, you have a longer runway, right? And 2, you have more appetite for risk than you do at phase 3 trial, which is multinational and very, very expensive. So I think the more you can work with the clinical team early in the drug development process, the better it is.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's really well said. I think those are, like, I'm ready for that as well. Something that we've worked on a lot at J&J is having what we call bilingual scientists, meaning scientists that can develop an expertise in both the clinical development space as well as the AI/ML space or behavioral health space. And effectively, these folks are acting as translators. So they understand the pain points from the clinical development team, and those pain points can be translated into specifications for a digital health product that then the digital health team can run with and develop and deploy eventually. But having those mediators in between those two spaces is fundamental and something that's helped us integrate well throughout our TAs and into our many different clinical development programs. So that's one thing I would really advocate for, having those translators basically be effective in communicating between those two groups.
Cross-fertilization of the learning, that's great. What do you think about that?
I think that to really to get the digital endpoint to be involved in clinical trial, that should be a teamwork from multiple teams, like the clinical development teams, and also like the data science management team, and also probably sometimes we also need to work with the biostats just for the trial design. I think like for the challenge like to access large amount of digital data, this is really challenging for small companies. I was just thinking about maybe one possibility in the future, like maybe some of the digital data can be generated, for example, by some apps in the iPhone or some other apps. That's much cheaper than actually you pay a lot for some particular device. But of course, such kind of data, the relevance to the clinical trial result definitely need to be validated before you can really use it. Another thing I'm thinking about is like maybe in the future, I was talking to some other colleagues before, like if in general AI for drug discovery, everybody is talking about that they do not have enough data to train the model. So I was thinking about talking to some of the colleagues. So is it possible in the future we have some non-profit organization and that's going to share, some of the companies is going to share their data into this organization, and the organization is going to have some commission fee and service fee, but it's free available for all the biotech companies.
But at the end of the day, what's important is public-private partnerships certainly can help. But there's, within the organization, I mean, I can give you an example of two mid-sized companies. What they did was they created Carrasco, the two were pointing it out along the lines of, they created a cross-fertilized fellowship program where they identified key R&D scientists, and they basically had them rotate towards ML, AI, as well as digital health areas, and basically they created a whole fellowship program for them. They would go into those sub-functions, they would actually have to do actual projects on those, and so this is kind of a generation of next phase leaders who, as to your point, have that kind of dual expertise that can integrate different disciplines, AI, ML, digital health, as well as R&D and clinical development, and all of the key areas that come with clinical development, and be able to create a more cohesive integrated strategy. So I think the best way forward is because without a learning curve, it becomes very, very difficult for siloed sub-functions to create a difference. Even if they have a seat at the table, it just becomes very difficult. So I think that's where a lot of companies are moving forward, to have these cross-fertilized learning programs. And they're asking even the clinical leaders to roll up their sleeves and learn this stuff, because you can have that kind of an intuitional input and feedback loop back into the R&D strategy. But unless you have granular understanding of these things, you won't be able to actually execute a full cohesive strategy. So I think this is what, and to your point, public-private partnership in this area is also very important.
Moving, I think switching back to now
we talk about digital health, but we can only have one key topic presentation, but AI goes hand in hand with digital health, and so what I would like to have your feedback is, AI is a different field, and digital health is a different field, but they go hand in hand. And so what are the key areas of intersection where digital health and AI are meeting together across the R&D value chain to create not just value, but also a different way of thinking and working?
Yes, so when you talk about the digital health data and the AI, we can go actually start from the drug discovery and then to how it can help with the clinical trial design. Like if you go, so for example, for the drug discovery, and one of the major challenges actually is right now companies have generated a lot of multi-omic data, but sometimes for some of the disease, they are very heterogeneous. It's not really that helpful to identify this drug that is able to work for a particular subtype of patients. And then in the other case, like for example, we have the Sanofi, we had a program working with a company in France, and then they actually plug in the H&E images for the cancer patient. In the other case, we can actually use the deep learning method, and we can identify the images, which are the tumor cells, which are the lymph node, which are the macrophage cells. And then we did find that some of the digital features can actually separate the patients pretty well into subgroups. So this is one example for the drug discovery, because once you have the patient stratified, and now we can focus on the drug identification for each particular subgroup patient, it is very difficult to have a drug that works for every patient. So, and this is one example for the drug discovery. And another thing, like you can use the electronic health data for the clinical trials. You can try to identify whether from the previous studies or trials, any kind of electronic health, the parameters associated with your clinical trial, like the response to the drug or not. Or they can also help with like which patient should be included in the trial. So I think that they're going to have more and more roles in clinical trial with the digital data and the AI combination.
Yeah, I can briefly add it. So I echo all those points. That was very well said. I mean, broadly, the more digital data you collect, the more AI algorithms you can develop. So if you integrate digital health technologies throughout all your trials, collect all that data, centralize it, and that really enables your AI and ML scientists to develop new algorithms, to develop new biomarkers enabled by AI that can then feed back into the clinical trial space. So I think that the two really go hand in hand, and it's really a motivation for pharma companies like ours to deploy digital health technologies broadly so we can collect that data and reuse it for AI only.
Charmaine, if you have any last points?
Maybe just one comment. One link that I see between digital and AI is that, well, I've been a Pfizer for 7 years, and I've seen how we basically started from scratch and kind of developed these different endpoints for use across the portfolio, right? But it took a lot of time and a lot of effort from multiple people, multiple departments to get us where we are, and to set the stage so that we can continue to make improvements. I think the same needs to happen with AI. I think the expectation is that AI is going to come and solve all our problems and create just massive return on investment. But I think we need to understand that it takes time and dedication to make this happen, because ultimately we live in a very regulated environment, right? And quality is really important. We can't sacrifice quality. And whatever we develop needs to be validated and tested. Wow.
Which brings to the next question, because as I said, I can't agree more. The AI hype at the end of the day is causing a lot of negative effects across the pharma value chain, because companies are under a lot of pressure to just apply AI wherever they can, whereas it has a very select use cases right now. The best use case right now that we know works is the more that's a generic hypothesis. The more controlled an environment we're talking, the better AI would work in that context. Which brings me to your first slide, which is about discovery, and it's about target identification, and can take up to even 3 to 5 years to bring a lead optimization molecule to the surface. Everyone's now talking about Google's Alphafold. I don't know if folks are familiar with that, but you would want to go back, and for folks who will know, who haven't we're just scratching the surface on that. It's a very phenomenal, very enormously dense platform, which is actually, we're talking hundreds of thousands of proteins that they've been working on, and now you can actually predict this, not just structure, not their function, but also the interaction with the molecules, RNA and DNA. So people are also saying that it's Google Alpha, now there's my version 3 right now. It's like the next big thing after the Human Genome Project. So again, one thing that goes in this favor, and that's why otherwise I wouldn't have discussed, we're talking controlled environment. We're talking about enhancing our understanding of protein structure and function, and then obviously enhancing our understanding of translational science, and then translating all of that towards, again, we have better agility, we can reduce the speed, we can increase the speed, we can increase our agility, we can reduce the traction time, and then also we can come up with better lead optimization molecules. That's the value chain that folks are saying right now Google Alphafold and other platforms offer. I would like for you to start commenting on that, and then we'll go one by one on that.
Yes, thank you. I think Alphafold definitely is a really incredible breakthrough in the biotechnology field. So before, I remember when I was a graduate student, there was a group that I was in the theoretical physics department. So there was a group who particularly trying to predict the protein structure by go from protein sequence and then trying to use a physical, what is called HP model for the protein folding and then into the protein structure. And this has been very challenging. It's the simplest model for predict the protein structure from sequence to the 3D structure. But now with Alphafold now, and especially Alphafold 2, we can predict the 200 million proteins, the structures. And even we don't really have any information in the PDB database before, we can still predict the structure. I think this definitely can really facilitate the drug design. I think so as a drug, we care a lot about the drug potency and also the drug selectivity. So in order for you to really have a good potency, for example, if you have a small molecule or a protein, so like they need to bind to particular targets in the patient body. So if you do not really know what are the active sites the protein is binding to the target and how good the binding it is, and then you don't know the affinity of that drug to the target. And then if you don't have a good binding, then which means that your drug is not going to work. And then also another thing that we care about is the selectivity. So we do not really want the drug to bind to every molecule in the body. So so we definitely need to know with this structure of this protein, is this going to interact with many other proteins in the body? So once we have the protein structure, and then we can actually strip out those proteins that is not a good target because they bind everywhere.
Can influence our reach for non-regular targets as well?
Yeah. And also another very, very big important thing is the solubility of the drug. So once you admit the drug, you need to be able to have the drug, you are able to absorb that. With the structure, you can modify the proteins.
30 seconds, please.
Very, very briefly, those are all really great points. I think the coupling of the in silico approaches with validation in the wet lab will be really, really important. So ultimately, you can do so much in silico, but you need to take those experiments and validate them in the wet lab, and that'll ultimately lead your progress forward into preclinical development, submitting regulatory packages, and even clinical trials. So the wet lab application is very, very important.
We have time for another question? Oh, okay, so we're done. And I had one more question, but I've been told to move to the policy. So we're opening the session for Q&A.
If anyone has a question, just raise your hand and we'll come around with the microphone.
Thank you for the presentation and a good panel, interesting discussions. Back on the digital biomarkers aspect, as you mentioned, a lot of these collaboration happening with the Dyne Society, also the FDA being involved in EMA. And it's clear the path forward would be to have a consensus and pre-competitive collaboration, because it's clearly companies and pharma should not be competing on the digital biomarker, but more on the compound. But yet we don't see this being applied on a daily basis. So what else is needed to move forward in that aspect?
Yeah, thank you for your question. I think a lot of things that we have already said, right? I agree. I think the path forward, this is the reason why we do open source algorithms, for example, right? Because if we can, whatever we can do to advance and increase the adoption of these digital endpoints in clinical trials, everyone will benefit, right? And ultimately, we don't want to have 100 ways to measure gait speed. We want to have a good, accurate way to measure gait speed that is as device agnostic as possible, so that we can implement it with confidence in clinical trials, right? So I think that partnership, there are a lot of opportunities. We've seen consortia happening, right? Like Mobile XT, for example, is one of them, and IdeaFast. I think pre-competitive consortia are the path forward, as I see it, right? Because we have multiple companies working together with patients, with patient advocacy groups, with regulators, really trying to see what is the best data we can collect, right? What I'd like to see more is, I'd like to see us learn and optimize data collection and learn from success stories. So we don't always start from scratch in every disease area. Because that is what I think is delaying our progress, right? There's only so much we can do if we start every time to validate every endpoint in every disease area. It's going to be very difficult. We can't do that.
Well, I think where there's hope is there's already precedences in the patient-reported outcomes suite and the COA in pharma. It's the first mover advantage is going to be there. That's the competitive proprietary aspect. But once an endpoint is validated, there's going to be a lot of published data, and you have to publish if you're going to be doing into clinical trial, and you can very easily reverse engineer that as well. So that proprietary aspect, in my opinion, if you take the PRO example, where companies went and validated their fit-for-purpose PROs, but that was just once the phase 3 was out, anybody could use that. So I think there is hope, where you know, it's the proprietary competitive aspects will just last for that window, the small window, and then everybody can benefit from it.
Thank you.
So the FDA has endpoints for traditional molecules such as alpha beta for the new Alzheimer's drugs, I believe, in plaque production. And we've been talking about digital endpoints, which are currently exploratory. This morning I was tuning into a lecture on integrating multi-omics into comprehensive it was a single cell, groupings. And my question is what potentially hybrid molecular and digital markers might look for measuring progression and endpoints.
Yeah, I can take a stab at this. It's a really interesting question. And this builds off something that Spring said earlier. There's something that we do, and at JJ we do a lot of work on something called digital pathology. And what we try to do there is look at a patient's H&E histology slide, which shows the tissue morphology, but what we're finding is that you can predict genomic and molecular biomarkers just by looking at the H&E tumor morphology itself. That's actually really interesting because that's an example of an AI-enabled biomarker derived from this 100-year-old technology H&E slides. So we're using that to try to screen, pre-screen patients that may be eligible for targeted therapies and trials that were targeted therapies. So I think that has a lot of promise because that has the potential to expand the reach for this type of genomic and biomarker testing in areas, especially where maybe NGS or other more traditional tests are not available. So that's one example that I can think of where we have these novel digital biomarkers coupled with maybe more traditional genomic type of biomarkers, and we're moving that into clinical trials.
I actually wanted to ask Yingchun exactly that, but I need to think way more broad topic questions about it.
It's a great futuristic question because that's where we want to go. We would want to see composite endpoints where we have traditional clinical endpoints blended with digital endpoints, and that would give them more precision as well as being able to qualify the effect size. But it's more futuristic at this point, don't you think?
It is coming.
It's coming. It's going to require quite a lot of validation and convincing and advocacy from folks like us in this room. Yeah.
But I think the most critical aspect is where we had a question before, unless there's cross-fertilization of the learning, because you can't have a composite endpoint when you're working in silos. When clinical leads actually understand digital strategy and digital endpoints, which is a very different field. It's kind of a different field than the huge learning curve. As long as we're able to bridge the learning curve and have a more integrated workforce that can cross the other line and learn all of these areas, I think it would be a little difficult in my opinion. I think there's a learning and workforce awareness standpoint as well.
Thank you so much for your discussion. So coming back to using digital and clinical data for drug discovery. So, coming back to the analogy of Alphafold, they basically have the whole thing you need to train on, right? So I think you need to have this data where you have the digital data available to link it to the drug in order to train those models. And how do you see how that can become available to, to practitioners? Because currently it's not there, right? Like currently it's not in the public domain. How do you think that can be done? I see you open source your algorithms, but do you open source your data as well? Would that help accelerate this process?
I can talk a little bit about my experience. I think that you are right. Definitely, if you have a clinical trial, if you want to, for example, to use the HA and E images for your as a biomarker, definitely you need to have the patient data with HE before and after the treatment. That in that case we usually do not have, and particularly in the cancer, a lot of the patients develop really fast, and you wouldn't be able even to have any slides afterwards. So that's the challenge. But we cannot do that, but we can use some available H&A image. For example, we have used the TCGA, those slides, and we had a drug, and we were able to learn to train the model to say that, use the TCGA images to say which other indications this drug can be applied to, which was very successful.
Wouldn't you want to
Yeah, I was just going to add that there are examples of open source algorithms and models that can be accessed by anybody. I mean, you need better direct infrastructure, you need certain level of expertise, etc. And there are data sets. So I think the trend is heading towards open source. And I think the more and more we do that, the more it'll incentivize other folks who are not currently open sourcing their algorithms and data to do so. Because at some point that's going to be commoditized, so it's more going to be around medication and the insights you can derive from those.
It would be extremely indication or patient specific, otherwise you're going to get model decay and model drift very quickly. So you want to specify very close, very precisely, okay, this is the data, but then we have to link it back to the exact disease, even the patient population, more so even for a specific subgroup that we're talking. So how do we provide all of that guidance and framework and in a non-proprietary setting?
And also there is also another issue with open source and data is consenting, right? We really need to be careful on the consenting language that we're using, and also what if consent is being withdrawn, what do you do in that case? And then how do you protect the integrity of the data that you, if for example you source the data, right, and you make it external, and then it's used in an AI model, like you are responsible. Yeah. Are you not responsible as a company for the outcomes of that model? If there is bias in your data sets, and the bias results in a ineffective healthcare for some part of the population, right? So I think it's a very complex topic, making data available. As I said, competitive consortia can help to at least make it available for a larger, wider spread of patients. So we're not of people. So we're not starting from scratch every time.
You with that?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everyone, this month we have a group photo. If everyone would like to come up to the front.